Montana Territory, 1887. The line between living and dying in Montana could be as thin as a wisp of spring grass. Beau Garrison knew this truth as he knelt beside the stream, fingers trembling as he pressed a wet cloth to the gash across his forearm. 3 days alone in the wilderness with wolves trailing his scent had taught him much about the fragility of life. He'd lost his horse to a rattlesnake spook, his provisions to the subsequent fall down a rocky slope, and now, it seemed, he might lose his arm to infection if the angry red streaks climbing toward his shoulder had any say in the matter. "Fool man," came a voice that startled him so badly he nearly toppled face first into the stream. "That wound needs more than creek water." Beau twisted around, nearly losing his balance as he searched for the source of the voice. There, framed against the sun-bleached Montana sky, sat a woman atop a sturdy paint horse. Her wide-brimmed hat cast shadows across features he couldn't quite make out, but the rifle resting casually across her lap spoke volumes. "Ma'am," he managed, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm obliged for your concern." The woman dismounted in one fluid motion that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. She approached cautiously, as one might a wounded animal, and Beau supposed that's exactly what he was. "Zara Northcott," she offered, crouching beside him. Her skirt was split for riding, practical rather than fashionable, and her cotton blouse had seen better days. But her hands, when they took his injured arm, were steady and sure. "And you're fevered. How long since this happened?" "Beau Garrison. 2 days, I reckon." She clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Then we're wasting time with introductions. Can you ride?" Before he could answer, darkness claimed him. Beau awakened to the scent of pine smoke and something savory that made his empty stomach clench painfully. He was indoors, on a narrow but comfortable bed, his arm bandaged and the fever that had been climbing through him noticeably absent. "Back among the living, are you?" The woman, Zara Northcott, stepped into view. In the lamplight, he could see her clearly for the first time. She was perhaps 30, with dark auburn hair pulled into a practical braid and eyes the color of the Montana sky in summer. Not a conventional beauty, but striking nonetheless, with a face weathered by sun and wind and determination. "How long?" he managed. 3 days. She handed him a tin cup of water. "You've been delirious. Lucky I found you when I did. I'm in your debt, Miss Northcott." A smile briefly softened her features. "Mrs. Northcott, technically, though there hasn't been a Mr. Northcott in 5 years. And yes, you are in my debt. I've used up nearly all my medicinal whiskey and a fair portion of my coffee treating that arm." Despite the pain still radiating through him, Beau found himself smiling back. "I'll replace both, soon as I'm able. See that you do." She turned back to the stove, where she was stirring something in a cast-iron pot. "Can you eat? You need strength." He struggled to sit up. The cabin was small but tidy, with a stone fireplace at one end and a cook stove at the other. A table with 2 chairs occupied the center, and shelves lined the walls, crowded with books, jars, and the necessities of frontier life. Through the single window, he could see twilight descending over pine trees. "Where am I exactly?" "My homestead, 5 miles south of Pine Ridge." She ladled stew into a bowl. "Which is where I assume you were headed before your misadventure." "Not many other settlements in this part of the territory." Beau nodded, accepting the bowl with his good hand. "I've got business there. Most men do." Her tone suggested she'd seen many pass through, few worth remembering. He ate slowly, savoring the first real food he'd had in days. The stew was hearty, with chunks of venison and wild onions. When he'd finished, she took the bowl without comment and returned to her own meal at the table. "Thank you," he said finally, "for saving my life." Zara looked up from her stew, her expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Garrison. You're not out of the woods." Over the next week, as strength returned to his body, Beau learned the rhythm of Zara Northcott's life. She rose before dawn to tend to her small herd of cattle, 2 milk cows, and the half-dozen chickens that scratched in the yard. She hunted and trapped, fished and foraged, maintained her fences and buildings with the same quiet competence she'd shown in treating his wound. And she did it all alone. "Your husband," he ventured one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "What happened to him?" She was quiet, so long he thought she might not answer. "Thomas took ill in the winter of '82. Pneumonia. The doctor from town couldn't make it through the snow." Her voice was matter of fact, but her hands, usually so steady, twisted in her lap. We'd been here 3 years by then. I'm sorry. As was I. She looked at him directly. But I stayed. This land was our dream. I wasn't about to abandon it just because he did. The fierceness in her voice stirred something in Beau. He'd known many women in his 35 years, saloon girls and society ladies, farmers' daughters and widows looking for new husbands, but none quite like Zara Northcott, who faced the wilderness on her own terms and asked for nothing. Your arm's healing clean, she said, changing the subject. Another week, and you'll be fit to travel. Eager to be rid of me, he asked, surprised by the pang the thought caused. Her smile was slight, but genuine. You eat more than my chicken's produce, Mr. Garrison. Beau, he corrected. After saving my life and feeding me for a week, I think we've earned first-name terms. She considered this, then nodded. Beau, then. And yes, I suppose you should know that while I don't mind the company, I've got the spring planting to manage. An extra pair of hands would be useful, but not if they're attached to a man too weak to pull his weight. It was the closest thing to an invitation he'd heard from her, and he seized it. My right arm works just fine, and I know my way around a plow. Do you now? Her skepticism was plain. You don't strike me as a farmer. I've been many things in my time. He looked out at the darkening landscape. Cowboy mostly, but I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I know which end of a seed goes in the ground. She laughed then, a sound so unexpected and bright that it seemed to linger in the twilight air. Well, we'll see about that tomorrow, won't we? True to her word, Zara put him to work the next morning. His left arm was still bandaged and sore, but he managed to help her prepare the garden plot, turning the soil while she followed with seeds, peas and beans, potatoes and corn, all precious in this remote country. You're not from around here, she observed as they worked. What brings a Missouri farm boy turned cowboy to the Montana territory? Beau paused, leaning on the shovel. The truth was complicated. I'm looking to start over, he said finally. Got an opportunity to buy some land outside Pine Ridge. Sight unseen, but the price was right. Sight unseen. Her eyebrows rose. That's a gamble. Life's a gamble. He resumed digging. I spent 15 years driving cattle for other men, sleeping under the stars and eating dust. Figured it was time to put down roots before I'm too old to enjoy them. Alone. The question was casual, but something in her tone made him look up. For now. He met her gaze. Some things are worth waiting for. A flush touched her cheeks before she turned away. Water the bean row when you're done there. They need a good soaking to start. The days fell into a pattern. They worked from sunup to sundown, sharing the labor of the homestead. Beau fixed the leak in her roof, mended fences, and helped move the cattle to fresh grazing. In the evenings, they sat on the porch, talking little but comfortable in the silence. On the 10th day, as they ate supper, Zara cleared her throat. Your arm's nearly healed. I expect you'll be wanting to head to Pine Ridge soon. Beau set down his fork. The thought of leaving had become increasingly unwelcome. I suppose I should. See this land I've purchased, make arrangements. She nodded, eyes on her plate. It's market day tomorrow. We could both go. I've got eggs and butter to sell, and you could ask around about your property. I'd like that. He hesitated. Zara, the dishes need washing, she interrupted, rising abruptly. Early start tomorrow. He watched her gather the plates, her movements quick and efficient as always, but with a tension he hadn't seen before. Something had shifted between them, something neither seemed ready to name. Pine Ridge was little more than a wide spot in the road. A general store, saloon, livery stable, and a dozen scattered houses. But after weeks of isolation, it seemed bustling to Beau as they drove Zara's wagon into town the next morning. I'll be at Greeley's, she told him, pulling up in front of the general store. Take your time with your business. He nodded, still feeling the ghost of her arm against his as they'd sat close on the wagon seat. I'll find you when I'm done. The land office was a small building next to the saloon. Inside, a clerk with ink-stained fingers pored over ledgers. Beau Garrison. Beau introduced himself. I sent payment for a parcel of land last fall. Came to claim the deed. The clerk, Peterson, according to the nameplate on his desk, shuffled through papers. Garrison. Yes, here we are. 160 acres, 5 miles north of town. Previous owner, Jeremiah Quinn. He frowned. Odd. There's a note here about a dispute. Beau's stomach tightened. What kind of dispute? Says here there's another claim on the property. From the Cattlemen's Association. Peterson scratched his head. You'll want to speak with Judge Wilson. He handles land matters. Returns tomorrow. Unsettled, Beau stepped back onto the boardwalk. The Cattlemen's Association was known for its aggressive tactics against small ranchers and homesteaders. If they'd set their sights on his land. Lost in thought, he nearly collided with a man exiting the saloon. Watch yourself, the man growled, steadying himself. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a handlebar mustache and the confident bearing of money. Pardon, Beau murmured, stepping aside. The man squinted at him. Don't know you. Just passing through. Something about the man set Beau's nerves on edge. Byron Galloway. The man introduced himself, extending a hand. President of the Pine Ridge Cattlemen's Association. Beau shook it briefly. Beau Garrison. Recognition flared in Galloway's eyes. Garrison? The one who bought Quinn's old place. That's right. Beau straightened. I understand there's some question about the title. Galloway smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. No question at all. Quinn had no right to sell. That land's been promised to the association for grazing. Railroads coming through, you see. Need space for the cattle shipping operations. I paid good money, fair and square. Then you were swindled. Galloway's tone hardened. My advice. Take whatever refund you can get and move on. Montana's no place for greenhorns. Before Beau could respond, he spotted Zara emerging from the general store, basket on her arm. She saw him and started across the street. Galloway followed his gaze. Well now, if it isn't the widow Northcott, still hanging on to that patch of dirt. Are you Zara? Zara's expression cooled as she approached. Byron, still trying to bully honest folks out of their land. Just explaining the facts of life to your friend here. Galloway tipped his hat. Afternoon, Mrs. Northcott. Mr. Garrison. With that, he sauntered away. Zara watched him go, her mouth set in a grim line. I see you've met our local tyrant. He claims my land purchase isn't valid. She sighed, unsurprised. Galloway's been trying to control all the land around Pine Ridge for years. He drove out 3 homesteaders last winter, burned one man's cabin to the ground while he was in town. And no one stops him. He owns half the town, including the sheriff. She glanced around, lowering her voice. What will you do? Beau squared his shoulders. See the judge tomorrow. Fight for what's mine. She studied him, something like respect in her eyes. Then I'll wait with you. We can stay at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. I know her well. I'd welcome the company, he admitted. And perhaps your advice. You've survived here when others haven't. A small smile touched her lips. It hasn't been easy. She nodded toward the wagon. Come on. Let's finish our business and find Mrs. Henderson before it gets late. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was spotless, if sparse. Beau took a small room on the 2nd floor while Zara was given the only other available space. A back room normally reserved for storage, but hastily converted with a cot. It's fine, she assured Mrs. Henderson, a plump, efficient widow in her 50s. Better than camping under the stars. After a simple supper in the dining room, Beau and Zara stepped out onto the back porch. The evening was mild, with a half-moon rising over the eastern hills. Tell me about this land you bought, Zara said, settling onto a bench. Why here? Beau leaned against the railing. The man who sold it, Quinn, described it well. A valley with year-round water, good grass, timber on the north slope. Room for a modest herd and crops. He smiled ruefully. Sounded like paradise after 15 years of drifting. And you never saw it? He shook his head. Was working a cattle drive in Wyoming when I got his letter. The price was too good to pass up. Too good, she murmured. Quinn was desperate. Galloway had threatened his family. Beau frowned. You knew him? Everyone around here knows everyone. Quinn was a good man, but his wife took sick. Needed money to get her to a doctor in Helena. She sighed. I heard they made it there, but I don't know if she survived. And the land? Is it as he described? She considered this. I know the place. It's good land, yes, but isolated, and directly in the path of what Galloway wants for his cattle operation. Beau absorbed this. No wonder he's so determined to run me off before I even arrive. What will you tell the judge? The truth. I have the bill of sale, signed and witnessed. I paid fair value. Zara's expression was troubled. Judges can be bought, just like sheriffs. Then what would you suggest? She was quiet for a long moment. Possession is powerful. If you're living on the land, working it, it's harder to force you off without causing a public stir. I haven't even seen it yet. Then that's your first step. She straightened. Tomorrow, after you speak with the judge, we'll ride out there. You should know what you're fighting for. Her matter-of-fact support warmed him in ways he couldn't quite name. Why are you helping me? In the moonlight, her face was shadowed, but he could see the set of her jaw. Because Galloway tried the same tactics with me 3 years ago. Claimed my water rights weren't valid, that I was trespassing on association land. I stood my ground then. I'll help you stand yours now. Impulsively, Beau reached for her hand. Her fingers were calloused and strong, but they trembled slightly in his grasp. Thank you, Zara. She allowed the contact for a heartbeat before gently withdrawing. Don't thank me yet. The fight's just beginning. Judge Wilson was a thin man with spectacles and a distracted air. He listened to Beau's case the next morning with minimal interruption, examined the bill of sale, and then sighed heavily. The issue, Mr. Garrison, is not whether you paid for the property. The issue is whether Mr. Quinn had clear title to sell it. He homesteaded it legally, Beau argued. Lived there 5 years and proved up, according to the terms of the Homestead Act. The land was his. The Cattlemen's Association claims prior grazing rights established before the homestead was filed. The judge shuffled papers. And there's the matter of the railroad's intended route. The territorial governor has expressed interest in supporting development. Zara, who had insisted on accompanying Beau, spoke up. Judge Wilson, the law is clear. Mr. Quinn satisfied all requirements for homestead patent. The association's grazing claims were never formally registered. The judge peered at her over his spectacles. Mrs. Northcott, still as well-informed on land matters as ever, I see. I make it my business to know the law, sir. When certain parties try to circumvent it. Wilson coughed uncomfortably. Yes, well, there's law and there's reality, my dear. The reality is that the Cattlemen's Association has significant influence with the territorial government. So you're denying my claim? Beau asked, anger rising. Not denying. Simply deferring judgment. The judge closed his ledger. I need time to review precedents. In the meantime, the property remains in dispute. I advise against taking possession until this matter is resolved. Outside the judge's office, Beau struggled to contain his frustration. That was no judgment at all. Just a stalling tactic. Giving Galloway time to pressure you further, Zara agreed grimly. Or worse. What do you mean, worse? She glanced around the street before answering. The last homesteader who stood against him was found shot. Hunting accident, according to the sheriff. Cold settled in Beau's stomach. You think he'd go that far? I know he would. Her eyes met his, hard with certainty. This isn't just about land, Beau. It's about power. Men like Galloway can't stand to be defied. He considered this. All the more reason to see this land. Know what I'm up against. She nodded. We'll need supplies if we're going out there. Food, blankets. There's nothing left of Quinn's cabin. Galloway's men burned it after he left. Of course they did. Beau straightened his hat. Let's get what we need and be gone before Galloway realizes we're not leaving town. They rode out of Pine Ridge at noon, Zara leading on her paint horse, Beau following on a sturdy gelding he'd purchased from the livery. Their saddlebags were packed with provisions for several days, and Beau carried the rifle Zara had loaned him. His arm, though still tender, was strong enough for riding. The trail wound north through rolling hills, following a creek that widened as they traveled. By mid-afternoon, the landscape opened into a broad valley, sheltered by pine-covered ridges on 3 sides. There, Zara said, reining in at the crest of a low hill. Quinn's place. Your place, if the law holds. Beau drew up beside her, taking in the view. The valley spread below them, perhaps 2 miles long and a mile wide. A clear stream cut through its center, bordered by cottonwoods and willows. The grass was lush for early spring, hinting at the richness of the soil. On the northern slope, a stand of timber provided natural shelter. It's beautiful, he said softly. And valuable. Zara pointed to the eastern end of the valley. The railroad surveyors marked a route through there last fall. A spur line to connect to the main track. That's why Galloway wants it so badly. Whoever controls this valley controls access to the railroad. Beau absorbed this information. No wonder the price was so low. Quinn must have been desperate indeed. Or perhaps he wanted it to go to someone who'd fight for it. She glanced at him. Someone who'd use it as he intended, not turn it into a cattle yard. They rode down into the valley, following the stream to where Quinn's cabin had stood. Now only a charred foundation remained, surrounded by the blackened stumps of what had once been a garden fence. Thorough, Beau remarked grimly, dismounting to examine the ruins. They always are. Zara slid from her horse, tethering it to a young cottonwood. But they missed something. She walked to a large boulder near the stream, knelt, and began digging with a small knife she pulled from her boot. Beau watched, curious, as she uncovered a small metal box. "Quinn showed me this once," she explained, brushing dirt from the container. "Said if anything happened to him, someone should know." Inside the box lay a packet of papers wrapped in oilcloth. Zara handed them to Beau. "His homestead patent, proof of ownership, and something else, I think." Beau carefully unwrapped the documents. The patent was there, officially stamped by the land office in Helena. But beneath it lay something unexpected, a surveyor's map of the valley, marked with notes. "Coal," Beau read, tracing the markings along the northern ridge. "Iron ore in the eastern section." He knew. Zara leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his as she examined the map. "No wonder Galloway wants this land so badly. It's not just about the railroad. It's what's under the ground. Quinn must have discovered it while digging for his foundation." Beau carefully rewrapped the documents. "Did he tell anyone?" "Not that I know of." She sat back on her heels. "Thomas, my husband, once mentioned rumors of coal in these hills. But no one took it seriously. Galloway did." Beau tucked the packet inside his shirt. "These change everything. If I can prove the mineral rights belong to the homestead patent, then the property becomes even more valuable, and Galloway more dangerous." Zara stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "We should make camp before dark. Not here, though. Too exposed." They rode further upstream, finding a sheltered spot among a grove of cottonwoods. As twilight descended, they built a small fire, careful to keep it hidden from the valley entrance. Over a simple meal of jerky, hard bread, and coffee, they discussed options. "I could file a formal counterclaim," Beau suggested, "with the mineral survey as evidence." Zara shook her head. "That would tell Galloway exactly what you know. He'd move against you immediately." She poured more coffee. "No, you need to establish presence first. Build something, start working the land. Make it harder for him to simply take it. That would mean defying the judge's recommendation." "It would." Her eyes reflected the firelight. "The question is, how badly do you want this land?" Beau gazed into the flames, considering. This valley represented everything he'd worked for, a chance for roots, for permanence, for something of his own after years of serving others' interests. But the risk was substantial. "I want it," he said finally. "But I'm not fool enough to think I can stand against Galloway alone." Zara's expression softened. "You're not alone." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Beau looked at her, this remarkable woman who had saved his life, who now offered to risk her own security to help him secure his. "Why?" he asked quietly. "You've built your own life, fought your own battles. Why take on mine as well?" She was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the fire. "Because I remember what it was like, those first years with Thomas. How hard we worked, how much we dreamed." Her voice grew softer. "And I remember how it felt when Galloway tried to take it all away after Thomas died. How alone I was." "What happened?" A smile touched her lips. "I outwaited him. Through a winter so harsh his men wouldn't stay to harass me. Through a spring flood that washed out his fences but spared mine. I was still there when others gave up, and eventually, he turned his attention to easier targets." Her eyes lifted to his. "But I never forgot. And I never forgave." Beau reached across the space between them, taking her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. "I won't forget your help, Zara. Whatever comes." Her fingers tightened around his. "We should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." They settled on opposite sides of the fire, wrapped in blankets against the spring chill. But long after Zara's breathing had deepened into sleep, Beau lay awake, watching the stars through the cottonwood branches and thinking about roots, about courage, and about the woman who embodied both. They spent the next day exploring the valley, Beau making notes about where he would build, where he would plant, where fencing would be needed. The work felt good, purposeful, despite the uncertainty hanging over his claim. "There," he said, pointing to a small rise near the stream. "That's where the house should be. High enough to avoid flooding, close enough to water, with a view of the whole valley." Zara nodded approvingly. "Good choice, though you'll want to consider winter winds." A windbreak of trees on the north side would help. I could plant saplings, he mused, or build a stone wall. Both would be wise. She dismounted, walking to the spot he'd indicated. Good drainage here. Solid foundation ground. Beau joined her, envisioning the home he would build. 2 bedrooms, he said, pacing out the dimensions. A large kitchen. A covered porch facing south to catch the winter sun. 2 bedrooms. Zara's eyebrow arched. Planning for company? He met her gaze steadily. Planning for possibilities. A flush touched her cheeks, but she didn't look away. Possibilities require certainties first, Mr. Garrison. And your claim is far from certain. Some things are worth the risk. He stepped closer. Don't you think? Before she could answer, the distant sound of hoofbeats froze them both. Zara's hand went to the rifle slung across her back. Riders, she said tersely. At least 3, coming fast. Beau scanned the valley entrance. Galloway. Likely. She was already moving toward her horse. We need to go? Now. They mounted quickly, Zara leading them up a game trail that climbed the northern ridge. From the shelter of the pines, they watched as 4 riders entered the valley below. Even at a distance, Beau recognized Galloway's broad-shouldered figure at the lead. They're tracking us, Zara whispered. See how they keep checking the ground? Beau nodded grimly. They must have seen us leave town. The riders reached the site of Quinn's cabin, dismounting to examine the area. One pointed toward the stream, toward the boulder where they'd retrieved the documents. They know, Beau muttered. Somehow they know about the box. Zara's expression was grim. Someone's watching us. In town, perhaps. The men remounted, spreading out to search the valley. One headed directly toward the stream, following their trail from earlier. Time to go, Zara hissed, backing her horse deeper into the trees. There's a route over the ridge that leads east. If we're lucky, we can circle back to my place by nightfall. They rode hard through the forest, following a winding path that climbed steadily upward. Zara moved with the confidence of someone who knew the terrain intimately, never hesitating at forks or clearings. You've come this way before, Beau observed as they paused to rest the horses at the ridge top. She nodded, scanning the valley below for pursuers. Many times. I hunt these hills in winter when supplies run low. Alone. There's been no one else. Her tone was matter of fact, but Beau caught the hint of old pain beneath it. They continued eastward along the ridge, descending gradually through thickening forest. By late afternoon, they'd reached a narrow canyon that Zara said would lead them back toward her homestead. We'll be exposed for a short stretch, she warned as they prepared to enter the canyon. If they've guessed our route. Beau checked his rifle. How far to your place from the canyon exit? 3 miles, maybe 4. Open country. He considered their options. If we wait until dusk, we'd have better cover for that final stretch. She nodded agreement. There's a cave about halfway through the canyon. We can rest there until twilight. The cave was little more than a deep overhang in the canyon wall, but it offered shelter and a vantage point of the approach. They unsaddled the horses, letting them graze on the sparse grass while they shared the last of their provisions. If Galloway's men follow us to your homestead, Beau said quietly, we'll be putting you in danger. Zara shrugged. I've faced him before. This is different. He knows you're helping me. That makes you a target. She met his concerned gaze steadily. I made my choice, Beau. I'm not afraid of Byron Galloway. You should be, he insisted. The man's dangerous. So am I, when provoked. There was steel in her voice. Besides, we have something he wants now. She nodded toward the documents still secured inside Beau's shirt. They fell silent, listening to the wind whistle through the canyon. Despite the gravity of their situation, Beau found himself acutely aware of Zara beside him. The scent of pine and leather that clung to her clothes, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way her hand rested near his on the stone floor of the cave. When this is over, he said finally, whatever happens with the land claim, I want you to know that meeting you has changed things for me. She turned to him, her expression guarded. Changed what? My notion of possibilities. He held her gaze. I came to Montana looking for land. I found something I wasn't expecting. Her breath caught. For a moment, he thought she might reach for him, might close the small distance between them. Instead, she looked away, toward the canyon entrance. Twilight soon, she said softly. We should prepare to leave. They reached Zara's homestead well after dark, approaching cautiously from the east. No lights showed in the cabin windows, no movement disturbed the yard. Still, they circled the property twice before approaching, alert for any sign of ambush. Seems clear, Zara murmured, dismounting at the back of the barn. But let's stable the horses inside, just in case. The familiar routine of caring for the animals steadied Beau's nerves. By the time they slipped into the cabin through the back door, the tension in his shoulders had eased somewhat. Zara lit a lamp, keeping the flame low. The cabin was exactly as they'd left it days ago, neat, orderly, undisturbed. She checked the rifle rack, counting the weapons, then nodded in satisfaction. We should be safe enough for tonight, she said, moving to stoke the banked fire in the stove. But tomorrow we need a plan. Beau placed Quinn's documents on the table. These are the key. With proof of the mineral deposits, I can file a formal claim in Helena, beyond Galloway's immediate influence. Helena's 4 days' ride, Zara pointed out. Galloway will guess your intentions as soon as you're gone. He could move against the property, or against me, while you're away. Then we both go. He spread the survey map on the table. Look here. The coal seam extends beyond my boundary line, into the next section east. If that land isn't claimed. It is, she said quietly. By me. Beau looked up, startled. What? She joined him at the table. After Thomas died, I filed for additional acreage under the Timber Culture Act. Planted the required trees along my eastern boundary. She tapped the map where it showed the adjoining section. My property borders yours, Beau. That's how I know these hills so well. He stared at her, understanding dawning. The coal seam runs under both our properties. She nodded. I suspected there might be something valuable there. Thomas had mentioned it, but I never had the means to investigate properly. And Galloway knows? He must. It explains his persistence in trying to drive me off, even after I withstood his first attempts. She traced the boundary line on the map. Together, our claims control not just the valley access to the railroad, but the mineral resources that would make that access truly valuable. Beau absorbed this revelation. Then we have more leverage than I thought. If we file joint claim to the mineral rights, we'd be stronger together than apart. She met his gaze. But that would mean partnership, he finished. Legal and binding. The word hung between them, laden with possibilities beyond the merely financial or legal. Zara's eyes searched his, wary but not unwilling. A practical arrangement, she said carefully. For mutual protection. To start with, he agreed, equally cautious. Though I'd hope it might grow into something more. Before she could respond, the distant sound of a horse's whinny broke the silence. Zara extinguished the lamp in one swift movement, plunging the cabin into darkness broken only by the faint glow from the stove. Back door, she whispered, reaching for her rifle. They slipped outside, taking cover behind the woodpile. In the moonlight, they could make out 2 riders approaching from the main road. Galloway's men, Beau muttered. They must have guessed we'd come here. Zara nodded grimly. They're not trying to hide their approach. They want us to know they're coming. A warning. Or a distraction. She scanned the darkness surrounding the homestead. These 2 make noise while others circle around. Beau tightened his grip on his rifle. What's your play? She considered briefly. Let them come. Let them think we're unaware. But be ready. They retreated to the barn, positioning themselves where they could observe both the cabin and the approaching riders. The men reached the yard, dismounting with the confidence of those who believe they have the upper hand. Northcott, one called. We know you're in there. The boss wants a word. Silence answered him. The men exchanged glances. Then the speaker approached the cabin door while his companions circled toward the back. Playing hard to get, the man called again. We can do this easy, or we can do it rough. Your choice, widow. When no response came, he signaled to his partner. Together, they forced the cabin door, disappearing inside. Moments later, the glow of a lamp appeared in the window. Searching, Zara whispered. For us and for the documents. Beau nodded. And the others? You were right about it being a distraction. 3 more, at least, she confirmed, pointing to shadows moving at the edge of the cleared area surrounding the homestead. Surrounding us. Options. She assessed the situation with the coolness of someone accustomed to survival calculations. They don't know we're in the barn. We have surprise on our side, but they have numbers. We could make a run for it. Through the back field, into the woods. And abandon my home? Everything I've built. Her voice hardened. No, I've run from Galloway before. Not again. Beau studied her determined profile in the darkness. Then we fight. But smart. She nodded. Follow my lead. Moving with silent efficiency, Zara gathered items from around the barn. A coil of rope, a lantern, matches. She handed Beau the rope. When I give the signal, she murmured, light the lantern and throw it onto the hay pile by the door. Then follow me up to the loft. He raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Whatever she was planning, he trusted her instincts. They waited as the men in the cabin completed their search, emerging empty-handed and frustrated. One lit a cigarette, its glow a pinpoint of red in the darkness. Nothing, he reported to the others who had now emerged from hiding. They're not here. Or they saw you coming and ran, another suggested. The apparent leader, a tall man with a distinctive limp, considered the homestead. Check the barn. Then burn it all. Galloway's orders. Make it look like an accident. That was when Zara struck a match. Now, she whispered to Beau. He lit the lantern and hurled it toward the hay pile she'd indicated. Instead of catching fire as he'd expected, the hay merely smoldered, creating a thick cloud of smoke that billowed toward the barn entrance. Zara was already climbing to the loft, rifle slung across her back. Beau followed swiftly, understanding dawning. The smoke would draw the men into the barn, thinking there was a fire to investigate. From their position in the loft, they had a perfect view of the barn door. When the first man entered, waving away smoke, Zara's rope dropped over his shoulders, yanking him off balance. Beau leapt down, delivering a swift blow to the man's temple with his rifle butt. One down. The second man rushed in, shouting alarm. Zara's shot from the loft caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Beau tackled him before he could recover, subduing him with a few well-placed punches. 2 down. But the remaining 3 had heard the commotion. They approached more cautiously, spreading out to surround the barn. Fire, one shouted, spotting the still smoldering hay. The distraction was enough. Zara dropped from the loft behind one man, her rifle connecting solidly with the back of his skull. He crumpled without a sound. 3 down. The last 2 opened fire, bullets splintering the barn wood. Beau and Zara took cover behind feed barrels, returning shots carefully, conserving ammunition. We're pinned. Beau grunted as a bullet whizzed past his ear. Zara's eyes gleamed in the darkness. Not for long. The horses. She whistled sharply, a signal that sent the stabled horses into a frenzy of movement, kicking at their stalls. Beau understood immediately. He unlatched the stall doors, and Zara slapped the nearest animal on its flank. The horses burst from the barn in a thundering rush, directly toward the gunmen. There were shouts, curses, the sound of men diving for cover. In the confusion, Beau and Zara slipped out the back of the barn, circling to come up behind their attackers. Drop your weapons, Beau commanded, his rifle trained on the nearest man. The 2 remaining gunmen froze, then slowly raised their hands. Galloway won't like this, one muttered. Galloway isn't here, Zara replied coldly. But I am, and this is my land. With efficient movements, they disarmed and bound all 5 men, using their own belts and bandanas as restraints. The 2 who had been knocked unconscious were beginning to stir, groaning in pain. What now? Beau asked as they surveyed their captives. Zara's expression was grimly satisfied. Now we use them as leverage. And as witnesses. Dawn found them on the road to Pine Ridge, their 5 prisoners tied securely to their saddles, escorted by Beau and Zara riding on either side. The men had been largely silent during the night, except for the one with the bullet wound, who occasionally moaned in pain despite the rough bandage Zara had applied. What exactly is your plan? Beau asked as the town came into view in the distance. Zara's smile was thin but determined. Public confrontation. Galloway thrives on secrecy and intimidation. Let's see how he handles open accusation in front of the entire town. That's risky. He owns half the town, remember? But not all of it. She nodded toward the church steeple visible on the horizon. It's Sunday. Everyone will be at services, including Judge Wilson and the few businessmen Galloway doesn't control. Beau considered this strategy. Bold, perhaps reckless, but with a certain brutal logic. And our evidence. She patted her saddlebag, where Quinn's documents were now secured, ready to be presented. They timed their arrival perfectly, reaching Pine Ridge just as the congregation was emerging from the small white church that served as the town's spiritual center. Their procession, 2 armed riders flanking 5 bound and battered men, caused an immediate sensation. People gathered in the street, pointing and murmuring. Beau spotted Judge Wilson on the church steps, his Sunday finery marking him clearly. Nearby stood Byron Galloway himself, deep in conversation with the town's banker, both men turning in surprise as the commotion grew. Byron Galloway. Zara's voice rang out, clear and commanding. We've brought back your men. Would you care to explain why they attempted to burn my homestead last night? A hush fell over the crowd. Galloway's face darkened as he pushed through the gathering townspeople to confront them. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, though his eyes betrayed recognition of his men. These accusations are outrageous. Are they? Beau dismounted, keeping his rifle ready. These men admitted they were acting on your orders. To destroy Mrs. Northcott's property and to retrieve certain documents you believe we possess. Documents? Judge Wilson stepped forward, frowning. What documents are these? Zara reached into her saddlebag, withdrawing the oilskin packet. Jeremiah Quinn's homestead patent, and his mineral survey of the land he legally claimed. Land that Mr. Galloway has been attempting to steal through intimidation and violence. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Wilson adjusted his spectacles nervously. These are serious allegations, Mrs. Northcott, with serious evidence to support them. Beau gestured to their prisoners. These men can testify to Mr. Galloway's instructions, and we have witnesses to previous acts of intimidation against other homesteaders. Galloway's composure slipped, his face flushing with anger. This is absurd. These people are trespassing on land reserved for the Cattlemen's Association. If my men took action, it was to protect rightful property. The land is mine, Beau stated firmly. Purchased legally from Jeremiah Quinn, who held clear title under his homestead patent. He turned to the judge. A fact you well knew when you claimed the title was in dispute. Wilson paled. I merely followed proper procedure. You stalled, Zara cut in, giving Galloway time to force Mr. Garrison off the land before he could establish his claim, just as you've done with others before him. The accusations hung in the air, damning in their specificity. The townspeople had gone completely silent, watching the confrontation with the avid interest of those witnessing long-hidden truths coming to light. Galloway looked around, sensing the shift in atmosphere. His customary confidence wavered. These are malicious lies, he blustered. I've worked for years to bring prosperity to this town. The railroad is coming regardless, Beau interrupted. But who benefits from it matters. You wanted control of Quinn's land, and Mrs. Northcott's, because you know about the coal deposits. Deposits that rightfully belong to the legal landowners. A new voice spoke up from the crowd, the banker, Mr. Hoffman. Coal deposits? Is this true, Galloway? Galloway's silence was answer enough. Show them, Zara urged Beau, nodding to the survey map. He unfolded it, holding it up for all to see. Quinn mapped the coal seam that runs beneath both his property and Mrs. Northcott's adjoining claim. A seam that could provide fuel for the railroad and jobs for this town, if developed legally and fairly. The implications weren't lost on the townspeople. Several businessmen moved closer, examining the map with new interest. Judge Wilson looked increasingly uncomfortable. This changes nothing, Galloway snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. The association has prior. The association has nothing, Beau stated flatly. No legal claim, no moral right. Just the power of intimidation you've wielded for too long. And that ends today, Zara added, her voice steady. Here, in front of witnesses. She turned to address the crowd directly. For years, Byron Galloway has driven out honest settlers, burned cabins, threatened families, all to consolidate his control. Her eyes swept the gathering. How many of you have lost neighbors? Friends? How many businesses have suffered as homesteaders were forced to abandon their claims? The murmurs grew louder, more pointed. Faces that had been neutral now turned hostile toward Galloway. The cattleman recognized his precarious position. His gaze darted to the sheriff, who stood uncertainly at the edge of the crowd, clearly reluctant to intervene against the tide of public opinion. This isn't over, Galloway growled, backing away. The territorial governor will be very interested in these documents, Beau finished for him, and in sworn statements from your men about your methods. He nodded to their prisoners. I wonder how loyal they'll remain when facing charges of attempted murder and arson. The man with the bullet wound spoke up, his voice strained but clear. I ain't hanging for you, Galloway. You said scare them off. not kill nobody. Galloway's face contorted with fury, but he was trapped. Too many witnesses, too much evidence laid bare. With a final venomous look at Beau and Zara, he turned and strode away, shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in my office. With the sheriff present, of course. Of course, Zara agreed coolly. And with these men properly jailed while they await questioning. The crowd parted as the sheriff finally stepped forward, his authority reasserted now that Galloway had retreated. I'll take charge of the prisoners, he announced, with a nod to Beau and Zara that held a hint of newfound respect. As the tension of the confrontation eased, townspeople surrounded them, voices raised in questions, comments, and surprising support. Several men stepped forward to help secure the prisoners for transfer to the small jail behind the sheriff's office. You did it, Beau murmured to Zara as they followed Judge Wilson toward his office. Your strategy worked. Our strategy, she corrected, a smile touching her lips for the first time that day. Our victory. The possessive pronoun warmed him more than the morning sun. The first of many, I hope. Her eyes met his, acknowledging the layers of meaning in his words. We'll see, Mr. Garrison. We'll see. The subsequent days passed in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, statements, and negotiations. Judge Wilson, eager to distance himself from Galloway's schemes, confirmed Beau's title to Quinn's homestead with unusual speed. The sheriff, sensing which way the wind now blew, proved surprisingly diligent in documenting the testimony of Galloway's men, who readily implicated their former employer in exchange for leniency. Galloway himself disappeared from Pine Ridge, reportedly headed to Helena to salvage what he could of his interests with the territorial government. But the damage to his reputation and authority was severe, perhaps irreparable. A week after their dramatic confrontation in the town square, Beau and Zara sat on the porch of her homestead, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The surveyor arrives tomorrow, Beau remarked, sipping coffee from a tin mug, to officially mark the boundaries of both our properties. Zara nodded, her expression thoughtful. And then you'll start building on your land. I will. He studied her profile. It's good land. Quinn chose well. He did. She turned to him, a question in her eyes. What about the mineral rights? The coal seam. Beau set down his mug. I've been thinking about that. The development will require capital, expertise. More than either of us has alone. But together? The word carried weight beyond the merely financial. Together, he agreed. I've drafted a partnership agreement. Equal shares, joint development. He hesitated, then added softly, if you're interested. Her smile was slow but genuine. I might be, though I'd want to review the terms carefully. I'd expect nothing less. He reached into his coat, withdrawing a folded document. Here, take your time. She accepted the papers, their fingers brushing momentarily. The contact sent a current of awareness through him, a reminder of all that remained unspoken between them. As she read, her expression shifted from business-like concentration to surprise. She looked up sharply. This isn't just a business partnership. No, he admitted. It's more, if you want it to be. The proposal he'd included went beyond mineral rights and land development. It outlined a shared future, a home built on the boundary line between their properties, combining their lands not just legally, but in every sense. Beau, her voice held uncertainty, though not rejection. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. When I came to Montana, I was looking for land. Something of my own after years of working for others. I never expected to find someone who would make that land feel like home. Her fingers tightened around his. We've known each other barely a month. And in that month, you've saved my life, fought beside me, shown me courage I can only hope to match. His gaze held hers. I'm not asking for an immediate answer. Just a chance to prove that what I feel for you is real. That what we could build together would be stronger than anything we could create alone. Zara was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. The breeze stirred her hair, catching the last rays of sunlight. You won my heart with your kindness, she said finally, her voice soft but steady. When you could have seen me only as a means to recover your strength, you saw me as a person. You helped with my chores, fixed my roof, listened to my stories. Hope rose in Beau's chest. And you won my admiration with your courage. Standing against Galloway, defending your home, our homes, when many would have fled. A smile touched her lips. Then perhaps we've already begun building something together. Is that a yes to my proposal? He hardly dared breathe. She looked down at the document in her hands, then back to his face. It's a yes to exploring possibilities, to seeing where this partnership leads. Her smile deepened. Both kinds of partnership. It wasn't a full acceptance, but it was more than he'd dared hope for so soon. Beau lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I can work with that, Mrs. Northcott. Zara, she corrected, her eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like happiness. If we're to be partners, you should use my given name. Zara, he repeated, savoring the sound. And I'm Beau. Just Beau. Her free hand rose to touch his cheek, the gesture tentative but tender. Then here's to new beginnings, Beau Garrison. May they be as promising as they seem today. The sunset faded, giving way to the first stars of evening. On the porch of a homestead built through determination and defended with courage, two people bound by circumstance and drawn together by something deeper contemplated the future, a future that now seemed rich with possibility. 1 year later, the new house straddled the boundary line between their properties, just as Beau had proposed. 2 stories of solid pine with a wraparound porch and large windows that caught the morning sun. Behind it stood a barn larger than either of their old ones, housing their combined livestock and equipment. To the south stretched fields of wheat and corn, to the north pastures for the growing herd of cattle that bore their joint brand. And beyond the eastern ridge, the first shaft of the coal mine was taking shape, financed by a consortium of investors from Helena who had been all too eager to participate once they'd seen Quinn's survey and the samples Beau and Zara had excavated. The railroad spur line was under construction as well, though it would follow a route negotiated with the new owners rather than imposed by Galloway's schemes. The Cattlemen's Association, now under new leadership, had settled for fair access rights rather than control, a compromise that benefited all parties. Pine Ridge itself was growing, with new businesses opening in anticipation of the prosperity the coal mine and railroad would bring. Judge Wilson had retired, replaced by a younger, more scrupulous jurist from Helena. The sheriff, having demonstrated his willingness to uphold the law regardless of who was involved, had been re-elected with broad support. As for Byron Galloway, rumors placed him in Wyoming or perhaps Colorado, his Montana ambitions thoroughly thwarted. His men had served brief jail terms before scattering to other territories, their loyalty to their former employer evaporating in the face of his abandonment. On a bright June morning, Beau stood on the porch of their new home, coffee mug in hand, watching as Zara returned from checking the newly planted north field. She rode with the same confidence he'd first witnessed a year ago, when she'd found him half dead by the stream. But there was an ease to her now, a contentment that had grown slowly over the months they'd worked side by side. She dismounted at the hitching post, removing her hat and shaking out her hair, now worn looser than when he'd first met her. The wedding ring on her left hand caught the sunlight, a simple gold band that matched the one on his own finger. They had married in April, once the house was completed enough to be habitable. A small ceremony in the Pine Ridge Church, attended by the townspeople who had become friends and allies in their struggle against Galloway. Their wedding night had been the first spent in their new home, christening it with the love that had grown steadily between them since that first proposal on her porch. "The wheat's coming up strong," she called as she climbed the steps to join him. "Another week, and it'll need thinning. We can hire the Peterson boys to help," he suggested, handing her a mug of coffee he'd kept warm for her return. "They're eager for the work." She accepted the coffee with a smile that still had the power to quicken his pulse. "Good idea. I'll need to focus on the preparations for the investors' visit next week." As equal partners in the coal venture, they had divided responsibilities according to their strengths. Zara, with her sharp mind for figures and details, handled the business negotiations. Beau, with his experience managing men and operations, oversaw the developing mine and the ranch work. "Any word from the railroad superintendent?" he asked, guiding her to the porch swing he'd built as a wedding gift. "A telegram yesterday. They're ahead of schedule on the grading work." She settled beside him, her shoulder warm against his. If the weather holds, the first shipment of coal could move by rail before winter. Beau nodded in satisfaction. Just in time for the eastern market's heating season. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee and watching a hawk circle lazily over the valley. Their valley, secured through struggle and partnership and love. I received a letter from Quinn, Zara mentioned. They had tracked down the former homesteader in Oregon, where he had settled with his wife, who had indeed recovered from her illness. His wife's expecting a child in the fall. Good news, Beau smiled. We should send them a gift. Perhaps a share of the first coal profits? I already suggested it in my reply. She set down her mug, turning to face him with an expression that held both nervousness and joy. Speaking of children, Beau's heart stuttered, then raced. Zara, are you? Her smile bloomed, radiant in the morning light. Dr. Jenkins confirmed it yesterday. By winter, there will be 3 of us in this house. He gathered her into his arms, overwhelmed by emotion. After so many years of solitary wandering, of working other men's lands and driving other men's cattle, he had found not just a home but a family, a future richer than any coal seam. I love you, he whispered against her hair. More than I ever thought possible. She drew back to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And I love you, the lonely cowboy who won my heart with kindness. And you, he replied, touching her cheek gently, the remarkable woman who won my ranch with her courage. Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, a future built on partnership, strengthened by love, and now blessed with new life. Above them, the Montana sky stretched endless and blue, witness to the home and legacy they were creating together in this land they had fought for and won. In the distance, the sound of hammers echoed from the mine construction, a rhythm of progress and possibility. Birds called from the cottonwoods along the stream, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers across the porch where 2 people who had once been alone now embraced the joy of being together. The lonely cowboy had found his home. The courageous widow had found her second chance. And in each other, they had found a love worth fighting for, a love that would endure like the mountains that cradled their valley, steadfast through all the seasons to come.